said, welcome to our second installment here of Bears in the Kitchen, a cook-along. My name is Elizabeth, and I'm a registered dietitian that works at UHS. I'm excited to be sharing simple, affordable recipes with you all, also nutritious and tasty with you all at home. So before I dive into what we're going to be going over today, I did want to go over some basic information, just nutritional information, because I work with a lot of students, and oftentimes I get questions about what's a healthy meal, and there's a lot of confusion over that info here about the healthy plate or my plate. Some of you may already be familiar with this concept. So this is like a guideline created by the USDA to help people better guide folks to make more balanced meals and more balanced choices. And so you'll see here that we have the different food groups, and we try to aim for having all the different food groups for most of our meals. So you have a starch, you have a protein, and you have a veg or fruit. And then once if you notice that, then we take a look at the proportions of each of the food groups. So we have a quarter of the plate starch, a quarter of it protein, and a quarter of it veggie or fruit. And now this isn't like written in stone or anything. Everyone's needs are different, and so someone might need more carbohydrates because they are more active, and you may have to tailor to your own. But I think this is a good place to start for most people in terms of trying to strive for more balance. And I also do want to acknowledge that sometimes you won't have access to all the different food groups for each meal. So again, it's not something that is you're perfectly doing it or not. It's just a guideline to help guide you to more balanced choices. And something that's really cool, I think, about this concept is that you can use it for all different varieties and cuisines of food. So it doesn't necessarily just apply to like American food, or it can apply to Mexican food, or this is a plate that's more like American South, Chinese, Asian. As long as you can try to familiarize and identify the different food groups, you can apply this type of healthy plate method. And this is just different visuals of different types of cuisines utilizing the same type of my plate method there. American food, Mexican food. So now getting to what it is we're going to be doing today, what y'all are here for. Today on this cook-along, I'm going to be showing with you how to make cheesy grits. So it could be shrimp and grits too if you happen to get shrimp. We were unfortunately unable to distribute shrimp, or I don't know, that'd be kind of weird too, to distribute frozen shrimp at the food pantry, which if y'all didn't know, for the next and the last Bears in the Kitchen cook-along, we tried to work with the food pantry to come up with ingredient bags that y'all can pick up. It's first come, first serve, and there's certain dates that if you're around campus, nearby campus, you can pick up. But shrimp wasn't one of the ingredients. So it's an optional ingredient, but I do want to go over how to cook it, because I think it's some students that I've worked with are a little afraid to work with protein or raw meat. And shrimp's I think a easy one to get familiar with, and it's frozen, and so you don't have to worry about it going bad. So I'll talk about how to cook it if you do have that with you. So we can do like shrimp and grits, the cheesy grits with creamy beans, and then on the side doing a sauteed tomato and collard greens. So we got like a full-on meal, and we can insert using our My Plate. We have some, we have our carbohydrate starch with the grits. We have creamy beans, that's also starch, but great source of protein. We can do shrimp, that's more protein additional. And then we have some nice sauteed tomatoes and collard greens for the veggies to fill out that my plate for balance, right? So firstly, working on the grits, because that is going to take some time to cook first. And while it's cooking, we can prep the veggie piece. Just to go over too, for this recipe, it's vegetarian. If you are using the Worcestershire sauce, sometimes that does have anchovies in it, so just be mindful of that. And then we're using cheese for a lot of flavor, and that has dairy, of course, in it. So those are some common allergies if you need to be mindful of that. Let's start with prepping the veggies that we need for the cheesy grits recipe. So let's see. We have onion, garlic. That's really all we need. And the rest is flavor that we're going to try to infuse into this polenta. And so what grits is actually, and I use it interchangeably just there, there is a difference. Grits are essentially corn. So, Ami, if you can I think there are a couple of folks in the waiting room. So polenta and corn and grits are just types of corn. Oftentimes grits can be made from, I think it was white corn, and polenta yellow, but here I'm using Bob's Red Mill corn grits. Mainly takeaway, it's made out of corn. So here I have the white onion. I'm going to be cutting the onion. Again, just as a reminder, actually, before we get started, we want to make sure that we are safe, like, in terms of cooking. So, wash your hands if you haven't already, right? 20 seconds, warm water with soap. On the cutting board, I have my towel too, just to make sure that things don't move around to prevent injury. And then the knife I'm using too, this is a chef's knife. I'm going to be holding it at the hilt here, right, so that I have a firm grip versus on the edge here. Sometimes people who are not as familiar with cooking it in the kitchen, if you're doing this, you don't have as much control versus if you were closer to the hilt of the knife here. So you got nice control. And every time we're working with round anything, and lots of veggies are round, right? We want to be mindful and try to create a flat surface. So what I'm going to do is cut this sucker in half, the onion. And we only need half an onion for the grits recipe, and then we'll save the other half for the sauteed tomatoes and collard greens.
Elizabeth, really quick, do we have a link to the recipe so that the participants can follow along as you go through?
Oh, yes. So let me find that really quick for you. We do.
Sorry about that.
Right. Here is the link, and I will put it in the chat box.
I also think this recipe is great because I haven't seen grits used with cheese before. So this introduced me to like all new ideas with how I could actually prepare them aside from the usual way.
Yes, and I think too, thank you for bringing that up, because I think when we think about trying to eat in a more healthful way, oftentimes people are afraid of flavor, right? Because it's like, oh, if I add this, like, oh, I feel like everything can be seen as like bad food nowadays, and we're kind of demonizing a lot of foods when really food is just different makeups of different nutrition. And so people are a little afraid to add flavor, and it has to taste good for you to eat it, right? Let's be real. If it doesn't, you're not going to do it for very long. And so it's okay to, as long as you can tolerate, not lactose intolerant, and some people are and they still eat it, you can use cheese for flavor. We can add sweetness to make things more appealing. And we're still eating very nutritiously. So I think that's that reminds me. That's a good reminder for me. Okay, great. So hopefully y'all are able to access the recipe, and that's essentially what I have here, what I'm following too. So the cheesy grits, now now we have a flat surface to work on, right? So it's not going to roll away from us. We're not going to, hopefully not injure ourselves. So we want to cut this finely diced, and you're thinking about it going into grits. So anytime that you've eaten any type of like porridge or oatmeal, right? Do you want big chunks? The smaller that we can cut it, the more surface area you think about it that we have. And so I think it's going to help add a lot of flavor to the grits. And here for the onion, and I'll probably start maybe crying a little bit because the onions are strong. I'm sensitive to the onions. So what you'll notice too is I keep I don't know, Amy, do you know what this is? The stem of the onion?
Like the root?
Root, yes. It's like not really stem. So this root of the onion, it keeps everything in place, right? Sometimes too, I know students will have a hard time like even dealing with onions, and they're kind of overwhelmed because things can get really messy. But if you keep that root intact, it makes it easier to then cut. And so what I'm doing is just making these slices here. I have not like cut off the root, and then I just turn it 90 degrees so that I can get a really nice, like a finer, a more smaller dice of pieces. Again, this will go incorporate really nicely into the grit. And reminder too, in terms of safety reminder, is have your bear claw ready if you've heard of that before. When we are cutting anything using a knife, we don't want to have our lone fingers out ready to be cut by accident, and also be aware of that thumb too. We want to tuck it in. So proper form until you're more comfortable. Oh, and here are the tears. So just be mindful of that, using that bear claw for safety. And so here we have our nice, half a white onion finely diced. Next is 2 cloves of garlic. So these garlics are right here. I have, oh, the onions are strong. I have, how I tend to do it is, they can be a pain to peel, but I'll just smash them. And that usually does enough to disrupt a little bit, and then I can peel them really simply, just like that, without having to, ooh. Oh my God, the onions. Let me wash my knife a little bit.
I am crying over here.
I'm crying. Okay, let me get a napkin.
This would be a good time to use your old chemistry goggles or anything along those lines.
Yeah, oh my God, crazy, and my nose going too. Luckily, it's just me eating this, so that's fine. So when you smash it like that, literally it's that easy to peel off. Like, it doesn't have to be a crazy fuss. You just want to be mindful. Sometimes people will say, like, for safety, like, you can push the end of your knife against it, and that gives it the same type of effect. And it may be a little safer, because when you go like this, you risk cutting yourself on the blade. So again, just be mindful of that. And now we want to mince it. And mincing is essentially means cutting into really small pieces. Again, you want to incorporate this, get the flavor to incorporate in the grit. And I still have, my bear claw here, my thumb tucked in, and you just kind of go around cutting it till it's small pieces. There's that. Onion and garlic, I will tell you, and y'all know this, big powerhouse of flavors. right, to work with onion and garlic. So I think it's really great to get familiar and comfortable with them. Obviously, if you don't like the flavors, then that's okay. You don't have to use it. But for many dishes, many cuisines, onion and garlic is used a lot. And because you add some volume to the meal that you're cooking and you have just a ton of flavor. Now, let's get our spices ready. So we have 1 teaspoon of dried oregano, just oregano here, you know, and paprika as well. 1 teaspoon of each. So I'm gonna get that ready and put that into one of my little saucer bowl things.
Is there a huge difference between paprika and smoked paprika?
Good question. You know, it tastes, I mean, smoked, you can smoke your own paprika actually and just pan fry it a little bit. But yes, I think there's a difference, and it's a stronger flavor that is quite nice. So if you want to go the extra mile, and you could either just purchase as smoked paprika, or even just toast it or pan fry it a little bit, and you would still get the same type of effect. But good question.
Oh, Zoe also mentioned that for people who don't like onion or garlic, cutting it really fine helps so that you can't see it, but you still get the overall flavor.
Ah, tricky. So is it just the stigma of the onion that we don't like, or is it the flavor? But yeah, if it's like a visual thing, that is a sneaky way to sneak it in. Now, for the Worcestershire sauce, and I may be butchering that, excuse me, but for this sauce here, and I'll show you the bottle. It's very originally typically made with like anchovies. This one happens to not actually have anchovies, so would be vegetarian, vegan. But a lot of you know, usually it's anchovy, and you got like sweetness and tang to this because it has some vinegar in it along with some spices. So a great way to add flavor. You can also add, you'll notice you can sub soy sauce if you don't have this sauce specifically. And the main, you just want, these are just different ways to add more flavor to the dish. Soy sauce is great too because you have some savory and umami you can add to this. This adds a little bit more of like a sweet tangy, but still flavor nonetheless. You only have a teaspoon of each, one or the other. And then we're gonna use, instead of water, now there are many different recipes, ways to make grits. We're using a broth just to infuse more flavor into it. Better Than Bouillon is a brand. I think this one happens to be chicken because I actually used my last vegetable bouillon for when I was testing this recipe. You can do whichever broth. I think vegetable broth is great. It doesn't have to be Better Than Bouillon. Sometimes they come in little cubes too, dried cubes, where you essentially just rehydrate it and add, you know, maybe it's like half a cube to 1 cup of water. Just look at the instructions for the ratio. And what's great too is you can adjust the saltiness too. So if you want a little bit more, you can add a little bit more. Or there's also the broths that are in the, you know, quart cartons. That works as well. It takes a little more space, which is why I like either the bouillon cubes or the bouillon cubes or the Better Than Bouillon, because it's concentrated and it doesn't take as much space. So the flavors, that, and then we add the beans and cheese later. So now we're ready to go in terms of getting the grits started on the stove top. So what I'm gonna do is grab my pot. So I have here, I would say it's called like a medium-sized pot. You can see this here, medium-sized pot. If you turn it around, sometimes they'll say the size of it. This happens to be a 2-quart. I think that works pretty well for this amount that we're going to be cooking. So let me put it here. So here we want to add, first thing we want to do is add the canola oil. and we want to get the aromatics going for the onions and garlic. So here, let me just move this over. This is for the saute. I'm going to put the oil on first. So this is just my bottled oil I'm using. You can use canola. Fine. And I just want to I'm putting it on a medium heat there. Then I have my onions and my garlic ready to go in. It would be helpful if I had that I can cook with. So here you go. I'm just gonna throw these in.
So I'm reading the chat right now, and so Donata mentioned that they use onion powder for seasoning when cooking for a person who doesn't eat onions. And then Zoe said a huge turnoff from onion is actually the texture. So that's why Zoe makes it really small and cooks it down. And they said it's the raw onion crunch.
Really? I have not heard that before. So thank you for sharing that. That's really interesting. I didn't realize. Yeah, what's cool, I think what's really cool about the onions and the garlic too, is that if you don't, those are pretty hardy vegetables and things to have, so they last really long. But also, you can get them in powder form. So if you happen to not have it and you want to just add some bit of flavor, then having some of those spices ready on hand is a great, I think is a great addition to any kitchen or pantry. So here, let's see, I'm cooking the onions and garlic until they're translucent-ish. And you should be smelling too. The smell should be happening and wafting over. I think they're ready to go. And then next, we're gonna add the fried oregano, paprika, and then the sauce of your choice just to get that nice and coated. And remember too, when you're cooking on stovetop, sometimes people are afraid of oil and skimp out. But remember, oil is important. You know, one, you don't want to burn whatever you're cooking too, but oil and fat is important in terms of flavor too, because it helps things stick. And you can get a nice browning too on your food, which add to just the pleasure of eating the food and makes it taste yummy. So I've added the seasonings, and now we're gonna add the grits and then add the broth as well. So I have already constituted my broth, again, with my Better Than bouillon. I'm gonna add that in now. Then I need to add, so we're adding 4 cups of broth or liquid. Okay. And the grits, again, this is, like which camera? This is the bag that I'm using. We want to add 1 cup of grits. So you may think that is a lot. Usually, depends on how you like your grits. Actually, some people like it a lot runny, like more water, some people less. You can decide, and the great thing about cooking at home is you get to then tailor to however it is you like it, versus you go to a restaurant and you're just stuck with what they give you. So I actually did this recipe originally. It had 3 cups of water, and I thought this is not enough. I like just a little bit more going. It was a little too thick for my liking. So that's about 1 cup there. So I added 1 more cup, and I looked at other recipes too. And very common to have this ratio of 1 cup to 1 cup of dried grits to 4 cups of liquid. So that's in there, right? You got all of your flavor going on, and we want this to cook then for 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll come back to it. I'm going to, it was on medium. I might turn it just a little bit lower. It depends. Your stove might be, different, different strength too. So I'm going to just let that go. And we want to just keep in mind and make sure that the grits don't get stuck on the bottom. So every so often, want it to stir. But in the meantime, though, I think this is a great opportunity to then just prep, use the time to prep our veggies for the saute. So now moving on to the sauteed, tomatoes and collard greens. This is also the opportunity for us to, I'll show you how to cook shrimp from frozen shrimp. Again, very simple, great protein to start off with. And I happen to like shrimp too, so it tastes good to me. Here, let's see, we need 1 cup of cherry tomatoes. We need a half of an onion, and we're gonna dice that. And then 1 bunch of collard greens. Leaves roughly chopped, it says, and stems diced thinly. Show you how to do that. Again, we're using the garlic for that flavor, paprika, and then lemon juice. Best if you're feeling fancy, but half to 1 whole lemon juiced, and then some salt. Again, I'm gonna stir. Just stir your pot. And if you notice that it is accumulating some grits on the bottom of the pan, you may want to lower down your heat too. It might be a little too high. But yeah, we just don't want it to crust the bottom of your pot. Okay.
Elizabeth?
Yeah.
We have a quick question. Is there another name used for white beans?
Oh, yes. So white bean is, really general. You can have, there are different types of white beans. So the one that I use is cannellini. That's a very common white bean. I'm going to show you the can here, cannellini beans. I think there's also, for example, like Great Northwest beans or something. Are
Great
you familiar
Northern.
with Great Northern? I was like Northwest, Pacific Northwest. No. So yeah, that's another type of common white bean that you will see canned or dried too. So just yeah, I like white. They have the kidney red beans, they have the black beans, they have the garbanzo beans. I like the cannellinis because they're really creamy, like just texture-wise, right? And it doesn't have too harsh of a flavor as, say, like a black bean. So that's why I think these are really easy to sneak into like creamy things if you want to bulk up volume or add some protein in. For example, like adding it to an Alfredo, I think you can sneak in because it's already creamy and the sauce of Alfredo sauce is creamy. That's why I think it's easy to sneak into these grits too, because the flavors aren't as strong, and so they hide in there really well. So I've already washed these 1 cup of cherry tomatoes, or whichever kind of tomatoes you want, and then let's dice the other onion. So you're gonna do that. Be sure to peel the onion first.
So while you're doing that, I actually have one more question about substitutions. What is a good green substitution for collard greens?
Oh, good. So you can really do whichever leafy greens that you want. I would say try to go for something that's like a dark leafy green versus like a romaine lettuce. Those wilt pretty fast, don't have a lot of structure to them. And so you'll just kind of have like a wilty saute, which isn't the funnest. So you can do, for example, chard. They have like the red chards or the green chards, rainbow chards. You can do kale as well. Those are pretty hardy, I would say dark leafy green. Mustard green too works. Yeah, I think those are some of the more common ones. And it would be helpful too to set a timer. So I think we've gone 6. I'm gonna go at least 6 more minutes. I think we've done maybe like 3 or 4 minutes so far. So again, 10 to 15 minutes cooking the grits on the stove top. So we have our onions here and the collard greens. So I know many folks may not be as familiar with collard greens. Let me get one more. Let me put my onions here. So collard greens are more common, I would say, in like the American South, Southern cuisine. Tend to use more collard greens than say here in California. Yeah, they are pretty hardy fellas. You'll see, and usually the leaves are quite large too. This recipe calls for 1 whole bunch. Sometimes this one actually isn't as big as some I've seen, but the larger they are, the thicker the stalk gets. And similar, if you're familiar with kale, kale can have pretty like hard stalks, the stems. This is even harder, I think. So because of that, you know, we, in terms of wanting to utilize as much as we can, part of the produce and trying to decrease, you know, eliminate or decrease waste, we can absolutely still eat the stems, but it's the way in which you prepare it and cut it that can make a world of a difference. So what I would do with something like this, you could take your time and like cut it, cut the stem out. But I learned from someone that, let me see if this actually works. You can just strip it too. And it can be as simple as that. Because this is going into a saute anyway, and you're roughly chopping, doesn't really matter in terms like what, you don't have to like have fine clean lines or anything. And I think it's a lot faster and can be kind of fun. So I'm just stripping off the leafy, soft leafy ends. And then if, you know, if the stem breaks off in the middle, then it'll likely be soft enough to eat. And that's the main concern, is that because the stalks are a lot thicker, we want to cut them smaller so that they can cook down, and they can cook down and we can actually chew it and digest it properly and not give ourselves stomach aches. Has anyone else, and you can, you know, use the chat, curious if anyone else has ever cooked collard greens or eaten collard greens before, or this is kind of a new produce for y'all. We got a lot.
Zoe mentioned that they have eaten collard greens but never cooked them.
Okay. So again, remember to keep an eye on your grits. It should be slowly bubbling away. I have mine on low right now, actually. And it's thickening up pretty nicely. Just make sure to scrape the bottom so it doesn't get stuck there. Okay. Great, so now you might think, wow, this is a lot, right? There's a lot of space in here. It's a lot of fluff, and it will cook down. I would just take, you know, you could make it into thirds or whatever is easy for you to manage on the cutting board. You want to just roughly chop it. Sometimes, like, people will, it's easier to like roll it so that you get it into a more confined space. And then, you know, maybe about like an inch in terms of the width that you're looking for. There's no real specific, you know, science per se to that. Roughly chopping. And then roughly chopping.
Would you say that this is one of the main ways to cook collard greens, is to saute them?
I think, now I'm not a collard green expert, but I think definitely cooking them down because they are quite hardy. The leaf is quite hardy. Some type of cooking. So whether it's saute, oftentimes in this, I believe in the South, they may do collard greens with pork and braise it, meaning that it's cooked in, instead of saute, which is like a quick higher heat cook, braised means like more like a wet cooking method. So there's maybe a broth or a water, some type of flavored water, oftentimes with, I think it's, what is a hammock? Maybe getting that wrong, can't quite remember, but some sort of pork, and that's the way to flavor it. And they will braise it, so cook it in a moist heat. Versus, other dark leafy greens like kale. Some people will do kale raw, right, and can eat it raw. You'd have to ribbon this and cut this really thinly so that you could eat it raw, but you'd have to cut it quite thinly. And then maybe the dressing would have to be a little acidic so it would break down the cell walls to make it easier to chew. So that is the timer for about 10 minutes. And you can check if you're cooking along, you can kind of check and taste it. Don't burn yourself though, please. And see if the texture is right. Do you? For me, it's good. I think it's good. So actually, I can just turn that off. If you find that it's still kind of hard, feel free to let it go for another, few minutes or 5 minutes. Fully up to you. And so I have these. I'm just going to put the collard greens here. And then I'm going to show you what to do with the stems now, because we can eat these guys. So the hard stems, what we want to do is cut them thinly. What it says on the recipe here. Some sliced thinly. I will, instead of, you want a little bit more surface area so that's easier to eat versus just like little bits, which you could do, right? If I just slice it thinly, like something like that. It's kind of more like a green onion. But if you want it like a little bit with a little bit more surface area, I would actually cut it in a diagonal fashion. If you can see that. Now I'll bring it up for you to see. But if you, cutting it diagonal too, gives it more surface area. One, it's easier, there's more contact area while cooking, so it's easier to break down. You can see there. And also easier to grab with a fork to eat. So that is how I would cut the hard stems. And think about any other hard stems, like you've worked with kale, or hard is a little softer. So you wouldn't have to worry about the hard stems, but kale can be kind of tough. And so this is a way to utilize it still and still be able to cook it and eat it. So I'm just cutting these all. There is a lot of them. Also want to be mindful of our time. So I'm gonna just cut a few of these just to show y'all.
Sama also mentioned that collard greens can be used as dolma, which is like a stuffed, like you use the leaves and then you stuff them with whatever filling you choose.
Yeah. Cool. That's a cool idea. Thanks for sharing. Learning so much from all of you. So we have our stems. We have, let's smash some garlic cloves. Where's my garlic cloves? Oh, here. Let's just get ready so we can saute. and then finish off the grits. So we're looking for 4 garlic cloves. And if I went over 5 or 10, do y'all have to leave exactly at 6? Or is it okay if I go over 5 or 10 minutes? Please answer it in the chat. I just want to know how to. Want to be mindful of our time together.
At least one person is good for after 6.
Okay. All right, so I've got my 4 cloves. Again, we're just gonna, we can chop it. It's a rough chop. Some people like big chunks of garlic. We don't have to cut it so small as we did with the, as we minced in the earlier one, just because we're going to, we don't need it to be, you know, tiny and incorporate it into the grits. This is going to go to a saute. So, you know, the larger pieces can hold their own. Okay, get and then lemon juice. So yes, our grits are done. We just got to add some cheese and beans, and we're good to go. I'm going to get another pan. Here, going to add some oil. One tablespoon of oil, and then season and cook the shrimp. I did say I wanted to show y'all how to cook shrimp. So if you do have shrimp or are interested in cooking shrimp, let me show you what the bag looks like. So oftentimes shrimp, and you know, any type of animal proteins are going to be more expensive than say plant-based proteins. But surely cooking at home in general is going to be cheaper than eating out at a restaurant too. So here is just like a bag. Oftentimes they come in 2 pounds, which may seem like a lot, but you know, it's frozen, so they can last a long time too. All I did was take whatever portion you want out, put it in water, or you just let it thaw overnight in the fridge, and you're ready to go. Before the event, I had just let it soak in water, and then it just thawed by itself. So after that, ready to cook. Sometimes the shrimp will be already shelled, like they already take off the shell for you. Sometimes it will be deveined, meaning they took out the poop, gunk for you. This one is they already deveined it, so it's cleaned already, and you just have to peel off the outside shell. And so I'm just peeling it off there. 1 teaspoon, so dried oregano and chili powder. All right, because we are going to be, I'm just gonna saute some of these to show you all, because shrimp, I don't know how many of us have had like hard rubbery shrimp. That's usually not the best way to have it. Shrimp cooks really quickly, and you'll notice right away from the pink, the color of the shrimp, and it'll turn pink. So it also cooks really fast, which is another positive, I think. Shrimp, you also can find the 2-pound bags on sale. I'll see them randomly on sale at Safeway for like half of the price. I think maybe many Americans are just not as fond of cooking with shrimp at home because I always see it on sale. So that's a great time to stock up or get a bag, right? To check out the sales. So with the shrimp, I have deshelled, peeled some of them. You just want to pat it dry because you don't want to, you know, get hit with the oil and the heat. And then you just add some of the spices, the oregano and the paprika. going to do this very quickly so I can show you all and show you how it cooks. I'm going to get some tongs. And so here we go. Because shrimp can overcook really easily, I'm cooking this first before I do the saute versus just putting everything in there. And then I will, once they're cooked, I'm just going to take them out and put them on the side. So again, I just want to show you what it looks like. Get a little closer. There. Let's see. And I also have my grits there. So I already have my beans drained from the can. Just toss them in. And I have my cheddar cheese. This is full fat. I'm going for flavor here. It's your choice, if you prefer, 2% or whatnot. But again, don't be afraid of flavor. You'll see that this guy is already turning pink, right? And especially if you can see it starting to turn pink on the side that is not touching the pan, like you want to flip it over. So those shrimp are already almost done. Then you're adding about half a cup of cheese. It's a good amount. So I'm going to put that in, and then you can just mix it all in while your shrimp is cooking. Yeah, the 4 cups of water looks really good. It's not as dry.
Also notice that she's using 2 different cooking utensils for the shrimp and for the grits.
Thank you. We don't want to be contaminating, cross-contaminating. With raw juices with cooked stuff. So here you go. You see some nice, just a nice browning there, right? It's pink. It's no longer translucent. These shrimp are ready to come out. I'm gonna grab a little bowl and pop them in. All right, we put these on the side, and now we can use the same pan to saute. Now I'm going to put the onion, let's see, we want to blister the onion. So what I mean by blister is that you'll see, the cool thing about the cherry tomatoes is that because they, when you cook them and say blister them, so on heat, you'll start to notice like a browning of the skin. It will essentially dehydrate some of due to the heat. The tomatoes can get kind of shrunken too, which means the flavor gets concentrated in those little tomatoes. And actually, you have some tomatoes that are higher in glutamate. What makes MSG taste so good? It has the natural amino acids. It's higher in there, and so if you heat it, there are foods that are naturally high in it. Like you have that umami taste, and so if you heat it up a little, the flavors get concentrated. Mushrooms are also high naturally in that umami taste. So you're seeing a little browning. I'm going to go ahead and add the onions and the stems. 2. And of course, if your pan is like looking really dry, you can add a little bit more oil, right? I'm going to add the stems first because the stems theoretically might take a little longer to cook than the actual leaves. So we want to try to remember, prioritize how long each thing needs to cook. Otherwise, if you put it all in once, right, things might get really mushy or just super overcooked. And so for me, the pan is looking a little dry. I'm going to add a little bit more oil because I know that I'm going to be adding more stuff after this. So what is your flavor coming from? Your flavor is coming from the garlic. We're going to add paprika and then lemon juice and some salt. So I'm going to add the paprika now. It calls for 1 teaspoon.
Elizabeth, is there a benefit to cooking vegetables in the same pan you cooked meat in? Shrimp?
Is there a benefit?
Yeah. Like, does it add flavor or anything?
Oh yeah, that would be the benefit, is the flavor. Yeah, because the shrimp is fully cooked, right? So it's not raw. You're not transferring raw to raw, or like raw to something not raw. But you would be cooking it anyways. That is actually one way of preserving, adding flavor. It's that using like meat juice, essentially, if you happen to be cooking meat, using that to flavor your vegetables. So that's why I think for a lot of, say, for example, Chinese stir fries, like you have yummy sauce that coats your vegetables and it makes it more delicious to eat versus just steaming, plain steaming veggies or just salt and oil, which works for some people but not for everyone, right? Especially if you're trying to get used to eating more vegetables. The flavor can go a long way. Now the chard, they don't need very much time. I'm just trying to mix it all up so it can thoroughly, every piece gets to touch the pan. We also too want to add that lemon juice. So lemon juices, I will actually roll this on a hard surface to make it easier to juice. If you have a juicer at home, great. I would say use that. I am just going to squeeze it manually and then throw it into the stir fry or the saute, excuse me. And difference there between the stir fry versus saute. Stir fry meaning you cook on high heat for a shorter amount of time compared to a saute, right? So we're not doing like high heat, short amount of time. We're doing a lower heat for over a longer period of time. I'm just trying to take out some of the seeds. So I have my acid there that I just added, the lemon juice. And then salt. And don't be afraid to season your food. You want to do it to taste also. So any of these recipes that I share with you, and this is 1 teaspoon, yes. Any of the recipes I share with you, start out with it, but you can always modify and change as you go, or salt or pepper to taste. What's most important is that it tastes good to you, right? So you always want to double check and taste your food. That is pretty much it, folks. So we have, I'm gonna go get a nice plate.
How's everybody else doing? Are you all just about done?
So there are different ways to actually plate this. And it depends on how hungry you are also. So I got kind of a small plate, but just in terms of showing you how you could plate it. We eat first with our eyes, by the way. So I think plating can make a big impact and make it feel more special, right? But in going back to, why did I choose this type of recipe? You have your protein, you have your veggie, you have your starch, you have flavor, and so just all the great components of a balanced meal, right? Again, it's that flavor. There. So the juice, yeah. So you have all the food groups here, right? Obviously the portion is a little small, so if this was dinner, yeah, I'd probably eat more. But it's up to you too. Everyone is different. But this is, hopefully, y'all enjoyed this meal or this cook-along.